We're going to begin by reading the Beatitudes today. And we're going to just begin to delve into what this is all about here in Matthew, the 5th chapter. Let me make some progress through my slides here. This is where we left off last week, talking about the structure of the Sermon on the Mount. It's placed in the Gospel of Matthew, and there's just that one page. That's your memory cheat sheet, remember, that you can be able to memorize all of the Sermon on the Mount in all of its parts. So today, we're going to begin with the introduction. How many weeks we've been doing this? Today, we're beginning with the introduction of the Sermon on the Mount in the Beatitudes. And so let's go ahead and just read that together to begin our class today. Matthew, the 5th chapter, beginning in verse 3, the words of Jesus. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the gentle, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who have been persecuted for the sake of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when men cast insults at you and persecute you and say all kinds of evil against you falsely on account of me. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward in heaven is great. For so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. All right, so here we begin with this introduction to the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus is talking about all of these things, and each of these 9 statements that we call the Beatitudes. By the way, anybody know why we call it the Beatitudes? You're going to learn this today. If you don't know this today, you're going to find out why we call these the Beatitudes. When I was younger, I thought that these were the attitudes that you were supposed to be. And that makes sense. But that's not the origin of that word. We're going to look at that in just a moment. All right. So as we look at the Beatitudes, all of them begin with this expression in English: blessed or blessed are. And Matthew, we have in the manuscripts that's translated into English, comes to us from the Greek language. The Greek language. And the word for blessed or blessed is the Greek word makarios. Makarios. There are other Greek words that are translated blessed, but this is the word that's in the text. Makarios is the Greek word. Now you might be saying, well, wait a second. Did Jesus speak the Sermon on the Mount in Greek? And the answer to that is no, he did not. What language did Jesus speak? Jesus commonly in his day, along with everybody else around him, would be speaking in Aramaic, which is a cousin language to Hebrew. Now, when he went to the synagogue and read from the scrolls, he probably read in Hebrew. And Hebrew was the religious language of the time, and this was also the language of the elites in Jewish society. They would speak Hebrew quite regularly. And Jesus would speak Hebrew in his education coming up through the synagogue and things of that nature. But Aramaic was the commonly spoken language. And it's a cousin language. Has its Semitic origins, like Hebrew, and so there's lots of similarities. But Matthew writes it in Greek. And so that gives us a moment of pause to think about that word that we have, makarios. And the definition of that word is simply this: how blissful, how fortunate, how flourishing. That is the definition of that word, Makarios. And it includes concepts of fertility and prosperity and even security. And what we have here in the Sermon on the Mount are several statements that begin with Makarios. And that is a phenomenon all of its own, referred to as Macarisms. See, they have the same root word. Macarism is a series or a statement of Makarios. And so if I were to say to you, blessed are you for this reason or for this explanation, that would be a Macarism. Macarisms were things that were spoken by many rabbis of Jesus' day. But just by definition, a Macarism is a statement that ascribes happiness or flourishing to a particular person. So this is from a third party. Somebody is pointing and saying, that is a flourishing human being right there. That is somebody who's living the good life. That is somebody who's got it figured out. That's the essence of what a Macarism is. A pronouncement based on an observation that a certain way of being in the world produces human flourishing and felicity. That is a definition that was given by Jonathan Pennington. His book I'm relying on quite heavily, and he's quite the author and the theologian. This book is entitled The Sermon on the Mount and Human Flourishing, a Theological Commentary. Makes you want to go out and buy it right now, doesn't it? No. But he has a lot to say, and you got to wade through a lot of stuff to get to the pearls. But really, it's an excellent book for a reference. So I'm using him quite a bit. And this idea in the title, human flourishing, you see where that comes from this Macarism, or this series of Macarisms that Jesus gives. So that's the Greek word Makarios. Makarios. That is written, but Jesus didn't speak Greek, as we said. And so, here we go. The Latin word is translated, or it is for blessed, is beatus. That's the Latin. And so the word beatitude is simply a transliteration of the Latin expression of blessed. That's where that word comes from. It doesn't mean these are the attitudes you're supposed to be, okay? Although that works. That works, all right? So we need to delve into the Hebrew of this, I think, to really get to the point that Jesus is making. Because when Jesus says, blessed are the poor in spirit, or blessed are these individuals, or blessed are these individuals, to a Bible student, that's going to kind of ring familiar. It's going to be somewhat familiar to think, well, it seems like there's some other biblical literature that comes to mind where the author says, blessed are these people. And we find that, and we're going to look at, just in a moment, to the Psalms. And we're going to look at the first two Psalms. They're very special Psalms. When the Psalms were collected, these two are a couple of the most unique of all of the Psalms that were put in there just as an introduction. And we find this word, Ashrei, I think is how it is pronounced. In Hebrew, Ashrei, which means blessed. Blessed. And again, think of that definition of Ashrei would be, all right, this is a third person observing another person saying, Ashrei, that is a blessed person. This is a flourishing, fortunate, happy person. Okay? It's that observation. So we find this word ashrei 45 times in the Old Testament. 45 times. 26 times of those 45 it's found in Psalms. 8 times it's found in Proverbs. So overwhelmingly, we find this in the wisdom literature. Now, you might be thinking, well, doesn't the Old Testament have a lot to say about people who are blessed, receiving the blessings of God, the blessed? Yeah, and guess what? That's a different word. That is a Hebrew word, Baruch, I think is how it is pronounced. B-R-K. There aren't any vowels in that word. And so when you read about the blessings of God and the cursings of God, the word Baruch is used, not Ashrei. Because Ashrei is just one person looking at another person and saying, they've got it figured out. They're flourishing. They're happy. They're fortunate. They're thriving. That's what Ashrei means. So if we go back then and look at this. I wrote something else on that slide, didn't I? In Psalms and Proverbs, it's always connected to covenantal obedience. So who is Ashrei? Who is this thriving person? It's somebody who is keeping the Torah, somebody who's living within the principles of God, somebody who's living in wisdom that God reveals. So the result is human flourishing. Somebody who is navigating their way through the world with such wisdom and honoring God to such a way that they just come across as just having the good life. So that is the way that's expressed in Psalms and Proverbs. So let's go back to Psalms 1 and see if we can't understand this concept of Ashrei just a little bit. And just read Psalm 1 with me. How blessed, Ashrei, right? How blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, nor stand in the path of sinners, nor sit in the seat of scoffers. And we have a description of what this man looks like. His delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law he meditates day and night. He will be like a tree firmly planted by the streams of water, which yields its fruit in its season, and its leaf does not wither, and in whatever he does, he prospers. Tell me something about this guy. Give me your expression of how you would describe this guy, this Ashrei, blessed man.
He's got it made.
How does he have it made? How does he have it made?
Because God says you follow me and I'll bless you, I'll protect you, I'll provide for you.
So he's been following the Torah. He's been observing the law. He has inclined his heart to the wisdom of God's word. And what's the result of that? What are the descriptive phrases?
Well, he found it.
I'm sorry?
Like, to me, he found it.
He found the secret to life.
Yeah.
He found the secret to success. And what does that look like in this guy? What's the metaphor that he uses here? I find it extremely useful. He is like
A tree.
a tree. What kind of tree?
Well watered.
It's
Fruitful.
a fruit tree, but it's not just a fruit tree. It is a fruitful tree, right? Mm-hmm. And in what season is he fruitful? Well, here comes springtime, and pop, the tree's full of fruit. Okay, well that's wonderful. Early fruit in the year, wonderful. And then here comes summertime, and guess what? Still fruit. There's still fruit on this tree. Bumper crop, all right? And then fall comes, and the trees lose the leaves, right? Well, not this tree. Not this tree. He's fruitful through fall, and he doesn't go dormant in winter. He's fruitful year-round. Wow, that's astonishing. And he's firmly planted by the water. Yeah, he's got the secret figured out. He is flourishing. He is fruitful. He is prosperous. He is firmly rooted. So those are the descriptive words around this guy who's described as Ashrei. Blessed is that man. Just the casual observers walking by and saying, Ashrei. And then you go to the Psalm 2, and this is a different psalm altogether. This is a psalm about God and his interaction with the nations of the world and how they've turned their back on him. They don't recognize his sovereignty, his authority, his kingship. And God will crush them, basically, is the point of that. But in conclusion, he says this, do homage to the Son, lest he become angry. You will perish in the way, for his wrath may soon be kindled. Ashrei are all who take refuge in him. But you know who survives, you know who thrives, you know who flourishes? The one who has this covenant relationship with God. And he provides what for them? Security. Security. And so we have this picture of fruitfulness and prosperity and security now. So this word is used in lots of ways, okay? But those are some of the interesting concepts that we need to take away from this idea of Ashrei. So, Ashrei in Hebrew becomes Makarios in Greek, and then we turn to Matthew, the 5th chapter, and it becomes blessed or blessed. And I'm telling you, that's a problem. Let me just advance a couple of slides here. I see this sometimes when I'm scrolling social media, and I see shirts that have this slogan, blessed. And sometimes I'll ask, my patients who are coming into my pharmacy, how you doing today? And they'll say, I'm blessed. And as they're leaving, they'll say, have a blessed day. We use this word a lot. What does this word mean in our way of using it?
Good fortune, or may kindness come upon you, or
From
God.
From God.
Means your favorite drink is available again at Starbucks.
That would be
Is
a
that what it
blessing.
means?
Well, I'm just saying that's how flippant it seems to be used.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I'm so blessed. All right. So people use this word to saying, look at the favor God has bestowed upon me. I'm so blessed. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing to do or a wrong thing to do, to recognize that God has blessed us. But that's the way we use the word. That is how we understand the word. And when we read Matthew 5, that's what's in our mind.
But the word blessed has more of a concept of a gift or a divine providence, something you didn't earn, but you were just given.
Yeah.
Whereas the
Absolutely.
Beatitudes is, hey, I worked for this because I followed the rules. I did what God wants of me.
Yeah. And that kind of gets to the point of what I'm saying here, that we read the Beatitudes and we're saying, well, here are the ones that God has favored. God has bestowed his blessings upon these people. But that's not at all what Jesus is saying. There's a blessing in there, but it's not with the Macarism. It's in the second phrase of the Macarism in all of these. Notice that all of these have a blessed are, and then a consequence or a follow-up. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Then there's the blessing, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. When Jesus said, blessed are the poor in spirit, he wasn't saying, these are the ones God has favored. These are the ones God has showered with his abundant blessing. That is not the intent of that word. He's looking at these people and he's saying, these are the ones who have it figured out. These are the ones who have the good life. These are the ones who are flourishing in their walk in humanity. That's a completely different idea. And when you read the Beatitudes with that frame of mind, it turns everything completely upside down. It's like you're walking by somebody poor in spirit, like a homeless person, and you're pointing and saying, there's a flourishing individual right there. Jesus, are you kidding me? Are you kidding? That's flourishing? And you go to the funeral of somebody who's lost somebody close to them, and they're in desperate mourning and grief. And Jesus points to that one and says, that's a person who's flourishing. How happy, how fortunate that person is. They have it figured out in their grief. What? That doesn't make sense, does it? That's how shocking these phrases are. When we read them in English and it says, blessed are, we think God is showering blessings on these people, and that's not the intent at all of that. I've read it wrong all my life. I've read it wrong all my life. And it comes to understanding what these words mean. So, in my opinion, the English translations, when they choose the word blessed, and basically once that was the chosen word in King James, everybody followed suit, because the Sermon on the Mount has become its own icon. You can't change that word to happy are those, or flourishing, or fortunate are those. There have been some translations who've attempted it, but they've been rejected because it's blessed are those. That's what has stuck. And I think it's a bit of an unfortunate choice of the translators, because it doesn't convey the message as clearly as it could. So it fails to capture that intent. So it sounds more like a pronouncement of divine favor, which it is not, rather than painting a picture of what God, or what true God-centered human flourishing looks like. Jesus, in the Sermon on the Mount, he's making an appeal, he's casting an inspiring vision for what true well-being looks like in God's coming kingdom. He's there to announce the kingdom. And he's giving vivid imagery of what that looks like, and who is being the first to be invited, and it's the poor in spirit. It's the ones that are mourning. It is the ones that are gentle. And by the way, that word gentle does not mean that they're like we think of the word gentle. This is somebody who has no power. This is somebody who is disenfranchised. But at any rate, I don't know if you're following my point of this exactly, but think about that some. Yes, Chris?
If I'm catching on to what you're saying, would it be reasonable to translate or think of it as how successful are the poor in spirit, or whatever?
Yeah.
Because that's where the truest happiness or the truest blessings or the truest success comes from, is to...
But the crazy thing is, Jesus is pointing to the most wretched people, right? And who are gathered here to listen to Jesus? The hopeless, the fringes of society, the sex workers, the sinners, the sick, the lame, the people who have no prospect for power in life in any way. These are the ones that are there, and it's astonishing that Jesus first invites them to the kingdom. And he says the kingdom is within you in other places. We'll talk about that.
Putting it that way, you can really see how it would resonate with just the common people that were there.
Of course.
And how it would be super hated by people in power telling you have to live like this or you're not going to get to the kingdom.
Yeah. So for the elite to observe Jesus saying, these are the ones that have it made, are you kidding, Jesus? Their concept was, if you're wealthy, that's a sign that God has shown favor to you. And Jesus turns that concept completely upside down. So, Jesus wasn't the only one who used Macarisms in his teaching. Let's look at a couple of other examples of that. So there was this teacher in the 2nd century BC named Ben Sira. His name is actually Jesus Ben Sira, by the way. Very common name. But he's known as Ben Sira, and he has all of these writings. And so this is like 150 years before Jesus. And he's a rabbi who is understanding these things. And and listen to his beatitudes, so to speak, what he is saying about Ashrei. He says, I can think of 9 whom I would call blessed, the 10th whom my tongue proclaims. Blessed is the man who delights in his children, and the one who lives to see the downfall of his enemies. Blessed is the one who lives with a sensible wife, and the one who does not plow with ox and ass together. Blessed is the one who does not sin with the tongue, and the one who does not serve an inferior. Blessed is the one who finds a friend, and the one who speaks with an attentive audience. Well, those are some interesting beatitudes, aren't they? And what strikes you about that, maybe as you think about that compared to Jesus' beatitudes?
There's some that Jesus would disagree with.
So, yeah, there's something about the flavor of some of these that doesn't sound like kingdom of heaven at all, does it? It sounds like kingdom of earth quite a bit. The one who does not serve an inferior. Wow, how fortunate, how happy is somebody who doesn't have to serve somebody who is their intellectual inferior. Well, that may make for a more comfortable life, but certainly that doesn't fall within the scheme of the ethics that Jesus left with us, does it?
Some of these are just, we would say, common sense.
Yeah. Yeah, there is some wisdom here. The people who delight in their children, yeah, we all delight in our children when they do well. And the downfall of his enemies, again, that's a rather earthbound sentiment. The sensible wife, that could sound a little insulting in some ways, I suppose. But the one who doesn't sin with the tongue, does that sound like some of the Psalms or the Proverbs? Yeah. Yeah. And so this is the way teachings were done in this time period. This is one of the techniques of Macarisms, okay? This one's really interesting. Remember, the Dead Sea Scrolls. This is a recent development. In Qumran, these Dead Sea Scrolls were found, and they're still trying to preserve these scrolls and to unfold them, and there's still a lot of gaps even in this particular one. This one is 4Q525. If you Google that, you'll find exactly what I have up here on the screen. This scroll, this particular part of the Dead Sea Scrolls, was actually beginning to be preserved and unfolded and interpreted in the 50s. I'm saying the 1950s. That's how recent this was. And even as late as the 1990s, the interpretation of this scroll was taking place. And so we're benefiting by the scholarship of people of our generation who are opening these scrolls and interpreting them and preserving them for posterity. And so the Qumran community were the group of Essenes that we talked about, who were isolationists, who separated themselves from society. They were very pious individuals. And that becomes clear as you read the value system that is revealed in their Beatitudes. And you might read these or interpret these in a number of ways. Happiness of the one, you might say, blessed is the one who speaks truth with a pure heart, who doesn't walk about secretly speaking slander. Blessed is the one who takes hold of the law who doesn't participate in paths of injustice. Blessed is the one who dances in joy with her, that is, wisdom and the law, who does not pour out words on the paths of foolishness. Blessed is the one who seeks to have clean hands and pure life, who does not rise early to look with her with a deceiving heart. Blessed is the man who has reached wisdom and who walks about in the instruction of the highest and sets his heart on her path. So he describes the Torah here in feminine terms, her. And so you can see the allegiance that these people had to the law, and their fidelity to the law was of utmost importance. And again, that's you can almost imagine some of these sayings appearing in Psalms and Proverbs, right? Some of the wisdom literature. And so my point is, when Jesus started with this series of Macarisms, blessed are, people's ears would perk up and say, oh, we've heard this before. We've heard people teach like this before. But then when Jesus actually gave his Macarisms, it is unlike anything that anybody has heard before. Okay? Now, there are some similarities when he starts talking about ethical life. But early on in the Beatitudes, he has captured the imagination and the attention of these outcasts that he's speaking in front of, because he's saying, the kingdom of heaven is yours. You are being invited. And so, what a flourishing and happy life you have now, because the kingdom of heaven is yours. Can you imagine? What a monumental and remarkable concept for these people to hold on to. So, blessed are the poor in spirit. That's exactly what it means. You break that down. Poor means deficient. Spirit means breath of life, basically. These are people whose lives are pretty miserable. They're poor in life. They're sick, many of them. They have ailments. They have no prospect for any advancement of any kind, of being to provide for themselves. They're scraping by as day laborers, just trying by any means to feed their families day by day, struggling with all of these things, coming to Jesus to see if he is going to provide hope. And guess what? The opening sentence.
Video call.
Oh.
Could have been worse.
Yeah, I better stop screen sharing. All right, let me turn this thing off right now. Why aren't you answering my phone calls? Well, I need to stop screen sharing. All right. Whew. I'm glad I don't have her nickname in my. She has my nickname in her. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, I kind of lost my train of thought there, but.
Bruce, we got to talk about your emails after we get out. 200,000 kind of shocked us all. I might have 10,000 in mind, and I feel bad about that.
That one has been abandoned. Let's leave the rest of class just to have you share your thoughts up to this point in our study. Any questions that you might have or observations you'd like to share with the class?
You know, once you take some of Jesus' other teaching, then these Beatitudes make more sense. It's better to go to the house of mourning than the house of feasting.
Yeah.
How hard it is for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. And once you take those, they seem to This is almost like a preview, a teaser.
Yeah. Cool.
This is a clinic in how to engage and draw in your audience. As we were talking about, this is a welcome to all. This is, hey, the world doesn't see you as great, but I see you as doing well. You're here, you are welcome. Everything you long for, everything the world sees you as incomplete, I'm going to complete for you. You are poor here, everything I have is yours. Right? And so this is just an absolute clinic in how to.
We're going to pick up with that thought next week then. We'll talk some more about this. We'll hopefully get through the Beatitudes and into the metaphors next week. Thank you.